The message this morning is not about how to become a Christian, but it's more about our living as Christians. And so I invite you to Genesis chapter 29. We've started a series called Biographies of the Broken. It's stories from the Bible about real individuals who got broken by God. Not necessarily because they were worse than anybody else, but just because all people need to be broken. God loves broken things. A broken and a contrite heart he will not despise. But willful, proud, stubborn, those are things that God does not appreciate. We have talked about the fact that really you do have to be broken for salvation. You have to come to the end of yourself and give up your own works and your own plans. I give up. God, I need you to save me. But then beyond salvation, we have to be broken if we're going to be satisfied. We have to be broken if we're going to have fellowship. We have to be broken if we're going to have a sweetness about us from worshiping God. All these things. And now we're seeing how God will begin to work this brokenness in our lives. He has different ways of doing it. And we can see some of them in the life of Jacob. To understand Jacob's brokenness, we first of all need to see his fierce independence, pre-brokenness. So last week, and again this week, we're looking at pre-broken Jacob. Jacob as the man trying to do it on his own. Jacob thinking that he can handle life pretty well. Thank you very much. Before we look at some more of his attributes, I have this profound question for you. What do butterflies, Jell-O, and the most important things in life have in common? Does it sound like a riddle on a kid's cereal box? What do butterflies, Jell-O, any flavor, and the most important things in life have in common? Well, if you're still awake in about 40 minutes, I'll give you the answer. I think the answer comes, though, from Jacob's life, the study that we're doing today, even though he never had Jell-O. Genesis chapter 29, verse 18, we're reading about pre-broken Jacob. What was he like before God could greatly use him? And is it a reflection of me? Do I look like Jacob in this condition? Genesis chapter 29, let me remind us of, that's not Genesis, that's a different book. Let me remind us of the story up to this point. Before this time, we saw last week that Jacob had swindled his brother out of his birthright. He didn't exactly steal it, but he got it for a steal, if I can put it that way. And then he did lie and deceive and steal the blessing. He was always trying to wrangle and get things his own way. After he did those things, his brother Esau, who was a mighty hunter, said, I'm going to kill my brother, and he meant it. And so Jacob's parents tell him, you better get out of town for a while till things calm down. We'll see today that Jacob ended up being out of town for 20 years before he headed back home. In Genesis chapter 29, he's had this exchange with God where at Bethel he saw a vision with angels going up and down a ladder. And the New Testament references that vision that Jacob had as a picture of salvation. And Jacob, even after having a close encounter with God, has this formula that's very, very dangerous. It's the brazenness of Jacob that we should not have in our life, and is a sign of unbrokenness. And we said that Jacob was brazen in that he was bargaining with God. He's afraid, surely God is in this place. And then he says, God, if you'll do this, 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 and this too for me, then you can be my God. Friends, that is the wrong way to approach the creator of the universe who spoke the galaxies into existence. You're not at a negotiating table. He is sovereign. He is the master. And your answer should be, yes, Lord. Whatever you say goes. There's no bargaining with God. But that's where Jacob was. He's kind of started this process of meeting God for himself. He's just not the God of his father and grandfather, but he's not to the place of surrender and brokenness that he needs to get to. With that background, he continues his trip. He goes to his family roots up in Haran, up kind of north and east of the promised land that we think of. And there he runs into family and happens to meet a beautiful girl, and isn't that sweet? He goes and meets her dad and says, I'd like to have that girl, and I'll be willing to work 7 years if I can have her. And that was the arrangement that was made. Let's pick up the story. We'll only have time for verses here and there. Verse 18, please. Genesis 29:18. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee, her father Laban, 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love that he had for her. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. I think he had a calendar, don't you? 7 years to the day. He didn't set an alarm on his phone, but he knew it's time. I've been working for you. Give me my wife. In the story, it's a terrible thing. Laban, maybe he thought that his other daughter would get married off somehow in those 7 years, but apparently nobody came after his older daughter. And so there was a custom that the older daughter had to be married first, and he thought he would trick Jacob the trickster and give him Leah instead of Rachel. Leah is not who Jacob wanted, but that's who he got through a slick move at the wedding. And Jacob then is upset and says, you tricked me. I want Rachel as well as the daughter that you gave me, Leah. Come please to verse 27. Laban is now kind of half apologizing and saying, sorry, it had to be that way. Firstborn has to be first married. And then he says in verse 27, fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also, Rachel also, for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. You got to work 7 more years to get Rachel. Verse 28, and Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, Leah's week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. What I want us to notice here, and it might not seem like a bad thing, but I think it's something that indicates a heart condition. Jacob was willing to do whatever it took to get whatever he wanted. You can call it love, true love, romantic and sweet, whatever you want to call it. Jacob was determined to get Rachel. And he said, if I have to work 7 years, if I have to work 14 years, I don't care. I'm going to do whatever it's take. I'm man enough. I'm tough enough. I'm going to make it happen. I'll pay any price. I'll lift any burden. I can do this. I want her. I'll do what it takes to get her. Now that may sound romantic and make for a wonderful tale, but it concerns me as I look at the rest of Jacob's story. It seems to be a pattern in that he's very dependent and determined on his own willpower. Jacob had that quality about him that says, I'm going to find a way and I'm going to make this work. In a pleasant way, we might say he was committed. But his commitment was dependent upon his own ability to perform. I will work for you 7 years. I will work for you 7 years more. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get her. Again, if this were the only story we had about Jacob, we might think he was noble. But there's a side of this, an underbelly, that is not healthy. I have to ask myself, what is the difference between tenacity and stubbornness? Well, tenacity is what I have. Stubbornness is what my wife has. That's how that works. Right? Don't we tend to say, well, that person's just being stubborn. Well, me, I'm just determined and tenacious. We like to kind of flip-flop that, don't we? It is a worthy question, though. What is the difference between determination and stick-to-itiveness and not being a quitter? Listen, I am not a fan of being a quitter. I'm not saying Jacob should have quit when he said 7 years or 14 years. But I am saying that stubbornness is a tenacity that draws its strength from self. Stubbornness is a self-willed, self-powered determination, and that is the problem that I see in Jacob's life. Tenacity can accomplish a lot. You've known people in the workforce or in your family that, man, they just pushed themselves and they just worked and they climbed the ladder, and they were successful. And, they pushed their kids to practice, and their kids always won. Like they were determined, and it always worked. But at the end of the day, determination and tenacity can only accomplish so much, because they are natural resources, aren't they? They're man resources. They're something that comes from within me. So they will only produce natural results. If we want supernatural results, we don't need our own strength. We need God's strength. We can't just say, well, I'm going to grit my teeth and bite the bullet and make it happen. That's the American way. Does that really give glory to God? Well, everybody else quit, but not me. I just worked harder. I wouldn't give up. I'm tough. Where's God in all of that? As much as I'm not a fan of quitting, I will say that giving up opens the door for God to accomplish supernatural results. As long as you're trying, as long as you're determined and thinking that you're going to make the difference, then if God grants you success, who are you going to credit the success to? Yourself. But if you try and fail and say, God, I can't, God says, I'm glad you finally realized that. Let me take care of this. Are you like Jacob in his pre-broken state, where you're just committed to getting what you want? And you'll work the hours, and you'll do the research, and you'll be focused and hyper-driven, and you will make it happen. Is that still the merry-go-round you're on? Or has God given you the grace to step off and say, you know what? God, will you take care of this? Because my efforts are not good enough. Do you find yourself huffing and puffing after some good thing that you're going to make happen? By the way, was marrying Rachel a bad thing? Yes or no? No. But did Jacob need to make it happen on his own? Maybe it's someone that you're witnessing to, and you're determined to make them get saved. How does that go? Doesn't work, does it? Maybe it's a child that you're training, and you're determined that you are going to shape their will, and they are going to do this and such, and they are going to behave in this way, and they're going to look like this and act like that, and you're going to be the parent that makes it happen. That may be a good thing you're desiring, but as long as you're dependent upon your own strength, resources, tactics, and abilities, it's all flesh, and it's just going to blow away like chaff. Maybe it's a financial goal, and you're going to pinch the pennies, and you're going to restrict yourself and have a budget and not be too generous and be frugal, and you're going to do all these things, and you're going to accomplish that goal, and what's it going to get you in the long run? God said famously to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. You're not going to build this temple by your own tenacity, grit, strength, and resource. You're going to build this because I'm going to empower you. And if you will depend on the oil of the Spirit, if you will depend on my enablement, it can happen. Through the prophet Jeremiah, God said, cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. For he shall be like the heath in the desert, and shall not see when good cometh, but shall inhabit the parched places in the wilderness in a salt land, and not inhabited. So that's the cursed man. It goes on to say, blessed is the man that trusteth in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is. For he shall be as a tree planted by the waters, that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh, but her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit. What do you want to be, cursed or blessed? You want to be like that flourishing fruit tree? The difference is, one person trusts in the Lord, one person trusts in his own flesh. Pre-broken people are committed to making things work. I wish I could find for you the way it was expressed. I don't remember if it was in a book or a testimony or a quotation I wrote down. I can't do it justice. But it was a testimony of a believer from the old Soviet era, one of those satellite countries that was dominated for years in oppression and communism, where Christianity was illegal and our brothers and sisters were persecuted for believing the simple truths that we do. And I think after the fall of the Iron Curtain, this believer came to the United States and was able to visit a lot of Western churches and observe things and shared his testimony and such. And upon interview or question, the man described it this way. He said, in the United States, Christians are trying to build churches through what they can do by their commitment. But we found back under communist oppression that we had to see what God would do when we were surrendered. Do you hear the difference between committed, driven, people trying to accomplish good things, and people that understand, I can't do this? As long as you're the little engine that thinks you can, all you're going to do is natural things. But when you give up and say, God, I can't do this, wow, that's an open door for the power of the Spirit. Pre-broken Jacob was committed. He depended on his own will. Fast forward to chapter 30. He's still unbroken. Now he's been working for his father-in-law for 14 years so that he could have Rachel as his wife. And the 14 years are up, and he says, okay, that's enough. And Laban realizes that he has prospered while Jacob has been his kind of head shepherd, if you will. And so Laban knows a good thing when he sees it, and he doesn't want Jacob going away. And so he's trying to come up with a way to get Jacob to stay. And they arrange terms so that Jacob will continue to work for him, even though he's fulfilled his debt of 14 years. And so they work out some deal where some of the cattle will be yours and some of the cattle will be Laban's, and it'll be fine. And in this passage, I will admit to you, I have some questions about the science of sheep farming. Okay, Jacob's techniques here are very perplexing to me. And it's not so much a matter of what did Jacob do to make the flocks produce this way or that way. I don't think really Jacob was the one in control of the flocks. I think God was. In fact, later on in the text, we see that statement made, that God is the one that prospers Jacob instead of Laban. But what I want you to see in the verses that we're going to read is that Laban and Jacob were cut from the same cloth. You're going to see Laban continually trying to manipulate Jacob out of a good deal, and Jacob continually trying to manipulate Laban out of a good deal. They're like two businessmen brothers trying to be nice and polite, and meanwhile stab each other in the back. Neither of them are character that we should emulate. Genesis chapter 30, verse number 37. After they made the agreement that a certain kind of the sheep would go to Jacob and the other sheep would go to Jacob, this is what happens. Verse 37. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters in the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Please now, verse 40. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the face of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, notice this, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. He didn't put the rods in their water. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. Do you see what game he's playing here? He is manipulating genetically the herd to try to make sure that the ones that he gets as part of the deal are the good ones, and the puny, weak, sickly ones go to his father-in-law. Wow. Nice family, huh? I put it this way. Number two, pre-broken Jacob is not only committed to getting what he wants, he's clever in his business. He's clever in his business. Now again, just like there's nothing wrong with being committed, there's nothing wrong with being intelligent and making good decisions about the way you do your work. But when I say clever or cunning, or you could use the word shrewd, what I'm talking about is a kind of intelligence that is so attentive to detail, but not attentive to ethics. So Jacob is like, okay, if I do this, this, and this, and this, well, who cares what Laban gets? It doesn't matter. Who cares that they're actually his flock originally? I'm going to do this so that I come out ahead. Both Laban and Jacob are trying to play the system and rig the game to their own advantage. Jacob is trying to claw his way ahead. He's hyper-strategic with little regard for ethics. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then this will happen, and then I'll make this change, and I'll do this, and everything will come out for my benefit. Do you hear that voice in your head sometimes? Well, I'll tell this person this, and then they'll say this, and then I'll do this. And then I'll go here, and then I'll make this deposit, and I'll do this withdrawal, and I'll make this transaction, and I'll start this side hustle, and I'll do this, and I'll call so-and-so, and I'll da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and we have all these plans so that we can live happily ever after. And we get all these things rigged and figured out. And we're not so careful about how it affects the other person. We don't mind stepping on the other guy. After all, he'd do it to me if he had the chance. And so we are very clever in our business. We use our wit for our own benefit. I have to ask, are you frantic to get ahead? Are you content with where you are? Or do you need more? Nicer this, newer that, more of the same. You know, the world doesn't have enough in it to satisfy you. You can get everything you're dreaming for right now, and you'll be just as unsatisfied with it. Because those things are not supposed to satisfy you. Simple illustration. If I sit down at the meal today, and Bethany brings out a delicious dinner for us, it smells good, and the table's all set. We give thanks and pray for the food. And right after amen, I take my napkin and I just tear into it and I start eating it. How good am I going to feel after the meal? Am I going to be satisfied? Oh, honey, that was a great meal. Whew. I'm not going to be satisfied because I'm eating something that was never intended to satisfy. The napkin is just a tool to keep me kind of clean. The food is what's meant to satisfy my hunger. In this life, we so often ignore God, who is the one thing that can satisfy our hunger. We leave it sitting on the table, and we're chewing all the napkins and wondering why we're still hungry. Yes. Jacob was clever in his business. All his wit was bent on getting ahead, but getting ahead is not what will satisfy us. And for that matter, we don't have the ability to get ahead. If you had time to read the rest of the chapter, you would see that God specifically is credited with transferring the wealth from Laban to Jacob because it was part of his plans, not because Jacob was clever. Turn to Psalm 75, please. Psalm 75. Psalm 75. We'll see another expression of this truth. Before we read it, just be asking yourself some of these questions. Are you trying one thing after another to prosper? Do you find yourself doing this a little while and that a little while? Or are you trying one thing after another to be satisfied? I'm going to join this club. I'm going to do these lessons. I'm going to start this hobby. I'm going to make this investment. I'm going to have this friend. Are you desperate to have what someone else has? Are you just longing to be recognized for your achievements? Are you using all of your wit and to be clever in what you do? It's not going to work. Psalm 75, verse 6, 75:6 says, "For promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge. He putteth down one, and setteth up another." It's not your hard work that's going to get you ahead. It's not your shrewd plans that are going to help you beat out the other guy. It's not your synthesis of 96 books on parenting that you read that's going to cause your children to strategies. Work hard. Do those things. The difference is don't count on them. Right? There's nothing wrong with being the best sheep herder you can be. Just like there's nothing wrong with working to get what you want. But are you self-reliant in it? Are you saying, it's my strategy, it's my plan that's going to get me the flocks and herds that I deserve? We'll see a third characteristic of pre-broken Jacob. He's committed to getting what he wants. He's clever in his business. And third, we'll see he's calculating. He's calculating in his departure, and he's conscious of his deserts, what he thinks that he deserves. For this, we'll come to chapter 31. Understanding the timeline, and I apologize for kind of truncating the story and just going from segment to second segment, but our time is short. At this point, Jacob has worked a full 20 years for his father-in-law. 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and now 6 years just as a hired hand. But in the process, through God's hand, Jacob thinks through his own manipulation, much of the strength of Laban's herd has been translated to Jacob's herd. It's interesting, it says that Jacob separated his flocks 3 days' journey from Laban's flocks, and he put his sons in charge of them. Well, who were his sons? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Asher, Gad, the 12 tribes of Israel. So these guys are doing shepherding long before we get to the story of Joseph. Okay, so they are in charge of the Jacob flock, and when certain sheep were born to Laban, if they met these qualifications, they got transferred over. That was part of the contract. Okay, and gradually God put the strength of the flock into Jacob's flock, not Laban's. And so now Jacob realizes, I think I've played this gamble long enough. I'm ready to cash in my chips. I'm afraid that if I keep at this, I'm going to lose everything I've got. Let's see how the story plays out, starting in verse 1, chapter 31, verse 1. And he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So Jacob has his ear to the ground, and he hears, my wife's brothers are mad at me because they stood to inherit Laban's wealth, and they don't have it anymore. Laban himself, he doesn't look at me the same way he used to because he sees everything going my way. And then on top of that, verse 3, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Of course, that was the plan from the beginning. This was supposed to just be getting away from Esau so he didn't kill him. Coming out of verse 6. Jacob is holding a family council. He's talking to his family, his two wives. And he says, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father. Question mark? Do you think so? I don't know, all that stuff about the rods and the manipulation didn't really sound like he was serving Laban with all his might. He may have been serving with all his might, but not Laban. But this is the way he presents it. Verse 7, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said, the ring-straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straked. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. There's the verse I was telling you about. So Jacob recites to his family his concerns and says, I think it's time for us to leave. The daughters, interestingly, they're good and glad to go. They don't miss their father. They're ready to go. Let's come down, please, to verse 19. Jacob begins to make preparation. He gets all his family ready to travel. He makes sure that the minivan has plenty of gas and the car seats are installed. He's packed and ready to go. He's got the escargot strapped on, and it's going to be a great trip. but he waits for the right time. Verse 19, and Laban went to shear his sheep. Okay, so Jacob doesn't leave until Laban leaves. Laban kind of leaves the homestead to go for a sheep shearing event that's going to take him some time. In the midst of all this drama, Rachel steals the teraphim, the idols, the god statues of her father. In verse 20, it says, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban, the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. Now, I have to stop and be a little amused by this for just a minute. So you've got Jacob, 2 wives, which are daughters of Laban, a huge flock. You've got like 11 sons have been born. And Jacob thinks he's just going to tiptoe away and Laban's not going to know about it. Okay. Next question. What do you think Laban's going to do when he realizes you're gone? My 11 grandsons, my 2 daughters, and the guy who has run my herd for 20 years, I came home and they weren't here today. Oh well. No goodbye? No closing of the contract? No nothing? Just gone? Does he really think Laban's going to let that be? So Jacob's being shrewd, but maybe not as shrewd as he thinks he is. I'm not surprised that Laban did go after him. Verse 22, and it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled, and he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey. It took him 7 days to make up for the distance between him and home and the 3 days' journey that the family had taken. And they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And interestingly, God comes to him in verse 24 and says, don't you mess with Jacob. Verse 25, Laban overtakes Jacob, and they begin to have a talk in verse 26. Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Can't you just hear him? Are my daughters prisoners, that you fly away without saying goodbye to me? He's so upset. I didn't get to kiss my grandsons. And Jacob tells him why he ran away. But he says in verse 27, I would have sent you away with a parade. Verse 28, he says, I wanted to kiss my sons goodbye. And now notice Jacob's answer in verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. Let me pause and say, when you do what you do, motivated by fear, good chance you're doing the wrong thing. Jacob thought, if I say goodbye to Laban, he may kidnap my wives back from me. I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to sneak away. I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to wait till he's gone and run away. But it's interesting, in the verses that follow, Laban starts to search them for the stolen statue gods, which, by the way, if somebody can steal your gods, you need a different god. Furthermore, if someone can pack them in the luggage and sit on them, you definitely need another god. But that's the gods that Laban was worshiping. And Jacob says, fine, if you think we have your statues, go ahead and search. Imagine the awkwardness now as Laban searches Leah's tent and searches Rachel's tent. And Jacob is just steaming. He doesn't know Rachel has stolen the gods. And when Laban doesn't find them because of Rachel's deceit, Jacob says, look at this. You didn't trust me. And here we are, family. I can't believe you searched me. And then he goes on a little bit of a tirade and a little bit of a rant. Let's see if we can read some of it. Verse 36. And Jacob was wroth and he was chiding with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Never mind the part about the genetic manipulation and leaving when I didn't say goodbye. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff. What hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flocks have I not eaten. That which was torn of the beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou would have sent me away now empty. Wow, he's laying it on thick, isn't he? He knew how to do it. What's going on here? Jacob we see as very calculating in his departure. He told his wives, he got the family together, they were packed and ready to go and waited for just the right minute when Papa wasn't looking, and then they ran. His plan didn't work, and then when Laban comes after him, he's very conscious of what he feels he deserves. He says, I worked for you, and I endured for you, and I did this, and I did that, and I had this suffering, and you did that to me, and you weren't a good boss, and I deserve all this stuff. He's very calculating. It's like he's got a ledger in his mind, isn't it? I did this, this, and this. You did this, this, and this. I owe this. He's very calculating, depending on his own wisdom. Are you regularly reciting a list of all you've done for God and others? Like this little tirade Jacob just had? God, I've done this for you, and I gave up that for you. I could have done this, but no, I'm serving you. And this is how you repay me? Please don't talk to God like that. And don't talk to your family that way either. Because if you're talking that way, that means you didn't really do it for them out of love. Because you've kept track. They owe me. Are you always talking about how hard you've had it? It was so hot in the day and so cold at night. I couldn't even sleep. Does that sound like anybody here today? Do you silently wait for just the right moment to make your move? Chase has recently taken a renewed interest in the game of chess. Once upon a time, I could beat my son in chess. I blame the internet for teaching him better. And he's like telling me all this stuff. Dad, you could do this, and this is what you should. Thank you, son. Be quiet. Go mow the grass or something. But chess is a cool game. I can't call myself a chess player. I just know how the pieces move, okay? So I try to play chess. But it's an incredible game of strategy. And what you find yourself doing when you're playing chess is you look at all the pieces and you say things like this. Well, if I do this, then he'll probably do that. And then I'll counter with this. Or I think their next move is going to be this, and then I could do this, and then they'll do this, and I could do this. And a good chess player is usually playing ahead 3, 4, I don't know how many moves because I'm not a good player, but that's what they do. They strategize, calculate, respond, and counter-respond. Is that how you live your life? Are you living life as if it's a chess game? Well, my boss is this way, and this is their favorite color, and this is their personality, and they like this holiday, and they like this sports team, and so I'm going to ask them this on this day, and I'm going to da-da-da-da-da-da. And you got to control everything? That is an exhausting way to live. If you got to connive and make it all work together, if you are calculating in everything you do, and if you're conscious of everything you deserve, I've done this, and I've suffered this, and I've been through that, and just would you let go? Let go of the record books. Let go of the strategy that you think is so clever. And how about you let God be God today? How about you let Him be in charge of the chessboard of your life? Are you treating your neighbors, your family, and your coworkers as if they're a pawn, a bishop, and a rook? Are you trying to plan so that you can do whatever it takes to escape unscathed? Let me introduce you to a verse that could be a blessing to us all. Psalm 4, verse 8. I say introduce. It may be your favorite verse already, but it is a great solution for this calculating mindset of sneaking away all the time and trying to get what you deserve. Psalm 4, verse 8. A better alternative to Jacob's plan is this. Psalm 4:8. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. For thou, Lord, only makest me to dwell in safety. You can have a Doberman pinscher, a wall, ADT, and satellite security. But God is the only one who keeps you safe. You can have a brand new car with all the latest and greatest safety features, lane change alert and airbags and self-correction and whatever else, but the only one that's going to keep you safe is God. And so let go of the responsibility that thinks I have to calculate the way to make it all work. And you'll sleep better. Again, there's nothing wrong with being determined. There's nothing wrong with being strategic and prudent. There's nothing wrong with being careful to protect your family. But the problem is when our commitment and our cunning and our calculations are self-reliant. That's the bottom of all of this. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan. I'm not saying you shouldn't be wise and you shouldn't work hard. But I'm saying don't depend on that. You're not enough. And as long as you think you are, you're not broken. Jacob still thinks he's enough. Now, he's on a journey and he's starting to acknowledge God, isn't he? Have you noticed that? He says, God told me that we need to leave. And God's the one that, told you, Laban, not to mess with me. So he's starting to see God, but he is still doing a lot on his own strength. And if that's where you are, I encourage you to step towards brokenness and dependence upon the Lord. I love Psalm 104, where it says, speaking of all the creatures in creation, it says, that thou givest them, they gather. Thou openest thy hand, they are filled with good. The whole world is filled by the goodness of God, and yet we think we have to rake it in for ourselves. I like James 1, where it says, don't err, beloved brethren. Don't make this mistake. Don't think that you can somehow rake up good things for yourself. Instead, remember that every good and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights. Every good thing you have is not because of your strategy or your determination. It's because of God's grace. Broken people understand that. And it liberates them. Here's my action points for you today. Number 1, thank God for all he's given you. Recognize he's given you the flocks and the herds. He's given you the family. He's given you what you have. Thank him for it. It wasn't by your own might that you got it for yourself. Thank God for the gifts he's given you. And then number 2, think about the things you really want. Even the good things. And step back. Surrender them to God and say, God, if you want me to have them, I know you'll do it in your way and in your time. Oh yes, you still need to work, be faithful, do your part, have integrity. But stop depending on yourself to make it happen. Step back and recognize that any gift comes from God's grace. And if he doesn't give it to you, it's because he knows better than you. We ask the question, what do butterflies, Jell-O, and the most important things in life have in common? Just this. If you try to grab them for yourself, you'll either get nothing or make a mess of yourself and likely ruin the thing you wanted. Grab Jell-O, what happens? You're a mess and you got no Jell-O left. Look at the pretty butterfly. You're a mess. No more pretty butterfly. I've had the opportunity once or twice to be in one of those butterfly gardens where it's a huge greenhouse full of all kinds of tropical plants and fruits. And you go in and the butterflies will literally just come and land on you. And you can see them in all their beauty. You just wait for them and they come to you. Maybe that's what you need to do. Instead of trying to grab every butterfly you want, open your hand and let God bring it to you in his way, in his time. Pre-broken people are calculating. They're so cunning. They're committed to the cause. Broken people are surrendered to God and let him bring all good things to pass. Thank God for his gifts and step back from the things you want. Allow him to give them to you if he so sees fit. Would you stand, please, and pray with me? Father, help us to find that balance between being faithful to work because you commend diligence, but not depending on our work, depending on you. Help us to think and use the minds you've given to us and plan like the ant does for winter, but not to be too impressed with our own plans and to be ready and eager for whatever you do and whatever you bring. Oh Lord, help us to surrender so that you don't have to violently break us. Help us to be thankful for your gifts. I pray in Jesus' name.